indeed drop out of the race. She's actually polling better than him in some public polling that we have. And key Democrats are already rallying around her if Biden were to drop out.
There will definitely be other candidates. My understanding is there's 700 uncommitted delegates. And, of course, there are delegates who have fled. It would seem to me that any one of these people who aspire to being president, who would like to see a contest taking place, look at those 700 delegates who are now uncommitted and get into their action. And I do believe that all the delegates are committed only for the first round. And so you can actually fashion the process that's already in place to make it a mini primary, and I would support that, absolutely. We can't close that down.
This was a stunning moment, Cheryl. This was James Clyburn. He's the Biden-Harris campaign co-chair. And he is laying out a scenario where 700 delegates could select someone other than Biden. He also said he hasn't spoken to Biden in that same interview.
Yeah, but remember, he also yesterday was extolling the virtues of Kamala Harris. He was specifically asked, would he support her? And he went on a very long tangent about it in another interview. But I also want to point out, in that interview on CNN, he also said, as you know, because of legal issues, especially involving Ohio, it is my understanding we will have some kind of a virtual roll call before the convention opens. They are already planning this. They are already getting ready for DEFCON 9. That is very, very clear. I also want to say on the other side of this, and you and I talked about this before the show, we now have more and more calls for Biden to step down, including 400 business leaders and this coalition sending this letter. This is mostly left-leaning Democrats and major donors to Biden, who are now saying in a letter, 400 business leaders, executives, it is time for you to step down. When your money walks, what do? You tell me if you're running the campaign right now.
That's a big component of this. And Molly, if you think about this like a scale, on one end of the scale, what you have are Democrats who have come out publicly. There's been a few of them, like Lloyd Doggett yesterday in the noon hour, then another lawmaker. Then on the other end of the scale, you have those Democrats publicly supporting the president. And then somewhere in the middle, you have these Democrats in the shadows that are going to decide to come out or not and decide which way that scale tips.
Yeah, it's already shifting in the sense that for a while it was ageist to even question the president. You know, you're in some way prejudiced. You're disloyal. And now that's shifting to the point where it's acceptable to say, look at what we're all seeing. You're not looked at as disloyal any longer, like Clyburn. How can you argue this is complete disloyalty? He's been loyal for a very, very long time. So we see the narrative shifting even in the media, in the liberal press. I took a few seconds to watch one of the competing channels today, and some of the guests were almost giddy, salivating over this idea of a messy convention where at the end of it, Democrats come out with two much younger candidates and the excitement that could potentially build in the party. So there's an open discussion beginning to happen broadly, not just media. Now we're talking about potentially 25 lawmakers that could come out, and right now those Democratic governors are coming into town. And I think what the Governor Bashar of Kentucky, what he said, we want to make sure he's doing okay about the president. That doesn't sound so much like a show of strength as a well-being check. So there's definitely a shift happening.
That's a fantastic point, Paul. I mean, you have Newsom coming into town, Bashir, we've listed off all the governors. I mean, is this to assess the damage or support the president?
It's all a con job. What a con. I mean, here's how you know they knew all along, and now all of a sudden they've shifted into cover-up mode. They're not asking the question I think a lot of people are asking around the country in bars, restaurants, over the kitchen table, which is the following. In light of all the disastrous things that have happened, which we've heard about, Afghanistan, printing of money, the things happening relative to two wars, our southern border, no enforcement against anti-Semitic hate crimes, no enforcement against cartels doing human trafficking. There's one salient question that if you were really shocked by all of this, you'd be asking if you're sitting where they are, which is, who's been running the country? I mean, who's been making these decisions? We sat on this couch about 6 months ago. We said, Lloyd Austin went MIA. How could he think he could get away with that? And we decided, generally among all of us, that he did that because he knew nobody was looking for him. He got used to the idea that there was a vacuum at the top. I know bureaucracies. That's what happens when you think your overhead's not looking for you. You do what you want. He just figured nobody's looking, I'm going to go. And unfortunately, he had some complications, right? Now it's all coming to light. At least a year, and probably more. We've had no chief executive. I think that's the evidence. Why doesn't anybody want to know hey, who's been making these disastrous decisions? That's why we need the investigation.
That is why we need the investigation. And I do want Democrats, in their own words, to share with you their qualms. Jamie Raskin, in particular, had a pretty interesting assessment of what's going on. Let's listen.
I salute President Biden. I just feel that it's time for him to step aside.
I actually don't see a path now for President Biden to stay in this race in the long term.
Do you think he should drop out of the race?
Yeah, absolutely.
We are not operating like an authoritarian religious cult the way that the Republican Party operates now. There will be lots of discussion and lots of people weighing in, and I know this is a moving target. It's got to happen quickly, but I can guarantee you, Chris Hayes, there will be massive unity and focus on that task when we get to the end of this process, and it's happening very quickly, I think.
So, Karen, he's calling it a moving target that will happen quickly. What does that mean?
I have no idea, but how the tables have turned, right, Kaylee? Now leftists and Democrat column staffers are actually having to earn their salaries. So this is really interesting to me, especially you look at all of those comments coupled with Clyburn's comment. Clyburn, he was the veritable architect of that South Carolina firewall. Well, during the nomination fight for the Democratic nomination in the 2020 campaign, remember, he's effectively the kingmaker for Biden. So that makes it more significant, I think. And this point that Paul makes, we don't just not have a chief executive, we don't have a commander-in-chief. And that is the biggest problem here. Byron Donalds talked about it. It is a national security issue. The safety and security of the American people are at stake. Our enemies are emboldened. Our allies are skeptical. Look at Taiwan. What's going to happen there? These next few months are going to be absolutely critical. And in fact, these next few days, as Brett Baer said, are going to be absolutely critical because of that scrutiny. Because uncertainty equals vulnerability, and that is not good for our geopolitical situation.
I need to add one quick thing here. I had Brigadier General Anthony Tata on with me on Fox Business this morning. We asked this question, Paul, who is running things right now? He said when it comes to the military, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, they are running on their own. They are doing business without oversight, frankly, of the White House. And it shocked me. But he said that is what's happening. We had the Ukrainian war, we had the Israel war, and this is how the government is functioning right now. And I got to say, NATO is next week. Next week, Biden's going.
Well,
does that not worry anyone right now?
And Karine Jean-Pierre, and I'll just quote her, she said that he is going to give a, quote, big boy press conference at NATO. So Biden, your commander-in-chief, going to give a, quote, big boy press conference next week. We will see if he makes it. There's a lot of pressure right now, a lot of new reporting. We will bring it all to you.